What we know about in Ezekiel chapter 1 about Ezekiel is that Ezekiel is a priest. So he's from the Aaronic lineage. And one of the things that I think that's really important is because if you read Ezekiel, it's a kind of a different type of text than, say, Jeremiah, because Ezekiel is much more a priestly text. It's viewing things through the lens of being a priest. And so that's one of the reasons we get some really, really important fundamental stuff about Ezekiel and the temple that I think it's important for us to talk about today.
So here's the funny thing about his story is if he had stayed in Jerusalem, when he turns 30, he would be fully ready to go as a priest in the temple, performing all these priestly functions, which is, like Gaye said, Isaiah wasn't a priest, Jeremiah wasn't a priest, so this is unique, and yet he has been taken out of Jerusalem. He has no chance to perform those priestly functions. And here we are at this river on his 30th birthday, and he's probably feeling pretty discouraged about that my life is not turning out the way that I had anticipated. And by the way, there are probably many of you watching who could say, you know, I relate with Ezekiel, because maybe you've faced some serious discouragement or letdown or unfulfilled dreams or shattered hopes. And saying, is there anything worth living for at this point moving forward? I've lost my dream. That's kind of where Ezekiel is when this vision is going to unfold for him.
And briefly, how does it end? It ends on hope. So sure, there's been difficulties that Israel has to experience, Ezekiel's people experience. He's experiencing this. But eventually, it's hope. And for all of us, this is what Jesus brings. So I love how the book concludes on this really hopeful chapter that God will bring his paradise and his Eden again to all of us.
And that's why I think it's really important that we read the whole book of Ezekiel and not just pick and choose some chapters of it, because you might just read the judgment parts and think, oh, this is a horrible book. But you've got to see it in the context of the flow. And so the book starts with this really interesting vision that Ezekiel receives. It's probably not one that is familiar to us. It's full of symbolism. And so I think it's important that we take some time kind of trying to unpack this a little bit, because it really is going to introduce things that are going to pop up again later on in the book as we go. So as you look through chapter 1, by my count at least, there's 14 times in one chapter where it's referring to the likeness. What Ezekiel is seeing is like something, or the likeness of it. And I think that that's to reinforce for us the symbolic nature of what's going on here. Now, I think as we see these living creatures that are so very, very different from the realm that we're familiar with, there's some symbolism here that is not just unique to Ezekiel. Some of it we're going to see in Isaiah's prophetic call. We're going to see some of the imagery in Daniel, and the book of Revelation picks up a lot of this imagery as we go through. So let's talk a little bit about what Ezekiel is seeing. He's seeing some beings that are strange to us. So what are these suggesting to us? Number one, I think if we're looking at symbols here of these 4 faces, is reflective of divine attributes or qualities. So the human face is we may read that to represent intelligence. Remember that it was only humans that were created in the image of God, and they were different from God's other creations. Of course, the lion often has this symbol of royalty. The ox is kind of probably one of the foremost of the domesticated animals, and so has this symbolism of strength. And then the eagle, the chief of the birds, is the symbol of mobility. And so the creature here is trying to tell us about the attributes of God. Ezekiel is going to call these living creatures later in chapter 10 the cherubim. And I think it's important for us to know something a little bit about the cherubim. Cherubim are divine beings. They're composite beings that are going to combine the features of certain animals with humans. But they're also associated very much with the Ark of the Covenant in the temple, so that the cherubim are going to sit atop the mercy seat where God sits in judgment upon his people. And I think that that's a really, really important image that we've just talked about a little bit here. This first part of Ezekiel is going to be very much a judgment scene, but the imagery of cherubim helps us see that even in his judgment, God is going to couch that judgment within his mercy. So I think that that's an important issue. So let's pick this up in chapter 1. We've also, they've got wheels, right? That's another image. And I think that that is just this ability that these beings don't move like we do. They're not linear. They have the ability to go whichever way. And so making a difference between us and them.
Yeah, can you imagine Ezekiel, this man who lives in this ancient time period, probably did not have access to a massive dictionary vocabulary, and he's seeing this like incredible experience of God. Like, how do you express it?
Yes.
We all have the benefit that we've grown up with these texts and we have a general sense of what's going on, but my heart goes out to Ezekiel, who on his 30th birthday, he's like, I'm not in Jerusalem. I wanted to be a priest. And he sees this incredible priestly vision of the temple of God and all these amazing things. And he's like, how do I express this to people in a way that conveys God's divine message?
So can I just really quickly draw, I'm a terrible artist, but the idea being that at the four corners of this chariot, you have these four-headed, this is terrible, with wings. I don't know why I'm even trying this. They have the wings. You have a set of these cherubim at all of the four corners holding this platform, and on top of the platform, here's the throne of God. So ignore the drawing here. Just picture four sets of these four-headed and four-winged cherubim carrying the throne of God. And like Gaye said, they don't have legs. They've got wheels within wheels, and they can go any direction they want whenever they want.
And they can see in all four cardinal directions. I want to tie us into something we're all familiar with. The month of January is based on the Roman god Janus. It's a two-faced god who looks back and looks forward. And if you think about what happens in January, we look back on the past year and we celebrate the last year, and we look forward in anticipation to the new year. But it's, just two faces, forward and backwards. Here, you have four faces looking in all directions, symbolizing God's ability to see everything in his created order.